What are going to be our major sources of our major macronutrients to provide all these units of energy? It is going to be carbohydrates and it is going to be fats. Okay, these are our two primary sources. If I was to ask you on an exam, what is the primary fuel source to make energy, you would say carbohydrates, glycogen. Who's number 2 on that list? Fat. And I guess number 1 and number 2 could vary. If you wanted to argue with me, I would accept that. If you are exercising, I guess you're primarily going to use fat. Okay. Certain types of exercise use fat more than glycogen. All right. Your third source, which can't be argued, is proteins. That's always number 3. It's always the last thing to be used. Okay. It is for emergencies only. It is a last resort. We break these things down into their component parts and get them to where we need to so we can make things so we can provide potential units of energy. Some structures love only certain types. Brain loves glucose. Okay? Red blood cells love glucose. Now, if you're one of those keto people, fantastic. All right? You never truly go zero carbs. You shouldn't. And we'll peek at exactly why that is here. I'll show why that is here when we start looking at the next unit, next chapter. All right. But the brain loves glucose. Now, if you go low carb and go keto, you get a little bit of carbohydrates getting across that blood-brain barrier, but those astrocytes really limit it. Okay. And then they have to convert the ketones into carbs, and it just doesn't work out very well. Okay. So it takes a really long time to build up stores of ketones to get them to pass through that blood-brain barrier, to pass through those astrocytes. But they can convert them, but it just takes a really long time. One of the first side effects of going on a keto diet, guys, is brain fog. And that's just a fancy way of saying your brain's not getting enough ATP to do all the stuff that it has to do. Skeletal muscles love glucose. Skeletal muscles love fats, specifically fatty acids. And the glycerol, they'll convert into glucose and get it that way. But those fatty acid chains, oh man, if you're going to go at a very low intensity for a really long period of time, you're going to get on the treadmill and walk at a low intensity rate for an hour, you're going to burn a pretty good decent amount of fat. Okay. We can also use lactic acid. Lactic acid is going to be used when there's not enough oxygen around. Not enough oxygen. Okay. Ketone bodies are what you make when you do eat a lot of fats from eating lots of F-word fat. Okay. And again, lastly, amino acids. How much fat these things can yield? We'll talk about it more in the next unit. This is just trying to scare you and show you. That's the typical amount that you typically make in a typical cell. Some cells can be slightly more effective. Oh my Lord. Slightly be more effective in making ATP. You can see a theoretical field, an actual yield, 30 to 32. Where do I get that number? 4 plus that 34 plus that 32. Okay, so that's the typical amount. Okay. If you've seen 36 to 38, now you know why. Okay, but around 30 to 32 is the typical amount of ATP that's actually made in a typical cell under aerobic respiration. And aerobic means what? Oxygen present or no oxygen present?
Oxygen is present.
Oxygen present.
Perfect. Good job, guys. Okay. Oxygen present. If we have oxygen present, what little organelle do you know is involved?
ATP.
ATP, but who makes the ATP? It's the
Mitochondria.
the powerhouse of the cell, right? Take a hammer, hit yourself in the head. Powerhouse of the cell. Okay. So if we have oxygen present, we can make all of that 26 to 28 ATP because of that tiny creature. Okay, because of that little organelle. Okay. Your digestive tract, into your blood, into your cells, and we can enter into a number of fantastical pathways. We usually start with glucose because, again, glucose's function is to primarily provide the units of energy. Okay, so we'll talk about glycolysis and the transition reaction and Mr. Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. But fats do that as well. Triglycerides or ketones, they can enter, as you can see, in this pathway of energy that we'll talk about as the acetyl coenzyme A reaction. Spoiler, they provide a buttload of energy. It can really do a number to those systems there. You can see amino acids. They can go into a number of different pathways, to pyruvic acid or into a number of intermediates within the citric acid or Krebs cycle. Or we convert it into urea and remove it via those kidneys. So all of these processes that we're going to be talking about here, glycolysis, transition reaction, Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain, we get all of those basic units, those building blocks, if you will, from our diet. Okay, from eating that chicken sandwich with mayonnaise on it. Chicken's the protein. Bread can be the carb. And that little bit of mayo that you put on is your fat. Break those things down and utilize it for energy. If we've consumed too much and I don't have any need for this energy, I convert all that excess into the F word. That's why understanding calories is so important. Not necessarily a specific type of diet. Calories in, calories out.